Welcome back to Biblical Questions Answered, Episode 8. Is the rapture in 1 Corinthians 15? Well, like last time, let's begin with the passage in question. 1 Corinthians 15, 51 through 53. Listen, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. In an instant, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. For the perishable must be clothed with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality. This is probably the most famous rapture verse. It's almost, you hear it almost everywhere. People talk about it all the time. When you bring up the rapture, this is a verse that people will always bring up. You know, because trumpets, the sounds, the dead bodies of the Christians will be raised first, and then the living Christians are transformed as well. Now, is there anything that could perhaps suggest that this is not what it's talking about? Well, I'm going to reread it, but this time I'm going to go forward another 4 verses. Listen, I tell you a mystery. For we will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. In an instant, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. For the perishable must be clothed with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality. When the perishable has been clothed with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality, then the saying that is written will come to pass, Death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is thy victory? Where, O death, is thy sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God who gives us victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Now, is death really defeated in a rapture? Usually when people say a rapture happens, a lot of people die not too long afterward, and at very high numbers for about 7 years, depending on what version of the rapture you're looking at. So, sure, I suppose death is defeated for certain individuals, for a certain group of Christians. Okay, and death has no more hold on them, so I guess you could say death has been defeated, but that doesn't really sound like death being swallowed up in victory. And that idea of death being defeated, that sounds very familiar. In fact, just 20 verses earlier, in the same context, because the point of this chapter was talking about the resurrection. There are people who thought the resurrection wouldn't happen, and he goes on, he's talking like, well, the resurrection has to happen or else we've believed in vain. And now, 20 verses before, talking about the trumpet sounding and victory over death, he has this to say: Then the end will come, when he hands over the kingdom to God the Father, after he has destroyed all dominion, authority, and power. For he must reign until he has put all of his enemies under his feet. The last enemy to be destroyed is death. For God has put everything under his feet. Now when it says that everything has been put under him, this clearly does not include the one who put everything under him. And when all things have been subjected to him, then the Son himself will be made subject to him who put all things under him, so that God may be all in all. Now, here we have death being the final enemy. So, there really isn't a good way, at least in my mind, to convincingly separate the destruction of death with death being swallowed up in victory 20 verses later. And of course, if this is talking about the rapture, then you have Christ handing over his kingdom to the Father at the rapture, which doesn't work in any structure I've seen on end times. So, no, this passage isn't about the rapture unless someone can come up with a really good argument about how death being swallowed up in victory is a different thing than death being destroyed. But I don't think that that's very likely. No, my interpretation, and I think it's fairly clear in this passage, that this is about the second coming of Christ, where he defeats the final enemy, that is death, and maybe he defeats a couple other people too at that coming, and where the final resurrection and the final judgment occurs. Because, that's when the resurrection happens. Everybody's brought back to life. And then the judgment happens. So, yes, 1 Corinthians 15, not really a rapture verse. At least you can't really make there are problems with making it about the rapture, and I wouldn't really suggest doing that. So, that'll be it. That's it for this episode. Maybe I may be doing another episode on the rapture. I've got to find more verses about the rapture that are really really important, really meaty, very meaty, not vague references one place, but like something that you can really make a video off of. So, if you have some, please put them in the comments, because I'm sure there's someone who's going to, because this is not, and because this can be an emotional topic for some people, so I understand that. So, bye. I will see what other videos I have lined up in the future.